That's all right.
The thing is that the use of animals in scientific experimentation is unnecessary. First, I'm going to go over something that's called an LD test. The LD50 test is basically just they keep administering more and more of a kind of, not necessarily toxic, but any kind of substance, even water, until half of their subjects die. We'll go over that later. And then second, I'm going to go over how the tests and models that you would run on any kind of animal, it's kind of pointless because you don't know if it's going to be the same thing with a person. And then the last thing I'm going to go over is you really can't tell through an animal if whatever you're testing is actually working. You can't be trying to test something for headaches and just don't know if it's actually working because they can't tell you. So the first thing we're going to go over is the LD50 test. They basically, like I said, they just keep administering more and more of whatever it is that they're testing until half of their test subjects die. And because most of the time it is uncomfortable for the animal, they refuse to eat it and they do have to ingest it. So most of the time they have to forcefully do it, which usually is like tube feeding or injections. And according to Tom Regan, a former experimental psychologist who actually used animals in his research at Cambridge and Columbia universities, he even admits that because most of the cosmetic products, which is something he tested a lot, are not especially poisonous, it necessarily follows that if a rat or a dog must be killed this way, then a very great quantity of the cosmetic must be forced into their stomachs, blocking or breaking the internal organs, or killing the animal by some other physical action rather than just any specific chemical effect. So basically, the actual administering of the substance itself is what killed the animal, not necessarily the substance itself, so it's kind of irrelevant. It really doesn't prove anything. The amount of the products that they test is really unrealistic. I mean, you're not going to sit there and eat like 3 pounds of makeup or hair dye or any other kind of medicine that they're trying to test. Even if it is an accident, you end up going to the hospital. If they don't care how much you took, they're going to take you to the hospital anyway. They don't ask how much did you ingest and what is the lethal dose. They're just going to take care of it. And the second thing I'm going to go over is that the test that they do run on an animal, it's not the same as a person. Your DNA is different, your bodily functions are different, your organ systems are different. According to C. Ray Greek and John Swingle Greek, the sections that actually control what amounts and what things they have to test on animals, they admit that performing a test on an animal and then trying to test it on people when they do all the trials and everything is really just a leap of faith. They can't assume that because the animals are okay, that if they give it to a person, it's going to do the same thing and that they're going to be all right too. So they really just have to hope that no one dies or that as few amount of people die as possible. C. Ray Greek and John Swingle Greek also go on to say, or ask, is it scientifically credible to believe that what is discovered by using a cat, dog, or mouse, or even a rat can be extrapolated into human beings? So basically just backing up that you can't really prove that it's going to be effective the same in a person as it is in an animal. And lastly, you can't tell how an animal is feeling. It can't tell you, I have a headache. You can look and see, are the symptoms gone? The visible symptoms, the physical, you actually go in and see, are their organs functioning properly? Is their, basically everything is working. You can't actually ask them, how do you feel? Are you dizzy? Do you have a headache? Does your stomach hurt? And you can't really monitor pain. So it's kind of irrelevant to be testing on animals when it doesn't work the same in people. It's just not the same. You don't know. Like I said, it's a leap of faith. So it's kind of pointless. I'm going to go over it again. The LD50 test, really pointless because your purpose is to kill half the subjects that you're testing. So kind of unnecessary. You really don't need to know how much of it is lethal. All that matters is it poisonous, and we're going to handle it anyway. And the second thing was that animals aren't the same as people. It doesn't work the same, so kind of irrelevant. And then lastly, you can't tell how an animal feels. You can't tell if it was actually working or if it didn't work and you shouldn't be using it on people.
Right, you label the main proposition. I think the phrasing on it is a little bit broad. The secondary issues are problematic because they're not really phrased as claims. They're not declarative sentences. They're often descriptive without making an inference, and you need to be making inferences. I think that most of us could figure out what the inferences are, but that's really what you should be making as the supporting points. Support on the first point mostly defines what the LD50 test is. It doesn't really talk about the lack of need for the dosage level. The claim that you make right at the very end, this is where they don't even ask you how much you took or something like that when you're hospitalized. I beg to differ. If you go into a hospital, that's the first thing they're going to ask. What did you take and how much did you take of it? That's the first thing that they're going to be asking. So I'm not sure why you assume that the dosage level is not relevant. I think the stronger argument to make here is that the dosage level that's measured by the LD50 test is not accurate, or it's not necessary in order to tell whether or not something is lethal. And I think you need a little bit more information on those kinds of inferences. Most of what you do is you describe what the test consists of there. The second point, you did have some authorities that you cited that talked about the lack of utility of applying this, at least in theory. Now, I do think that it's a little abstract in the nature of that information, and as a consequence, the argument isn't as strong as it could be. There are a lot of questions that are phrased as opposed to claims that are made and examples or research that are used to prove. The closest that you get on something there is, like I said, the authorities that you're citing, but even they are speaking in that same abstract way. The third point, there's basically no information on. We're back to the same kind of issue here. The animals can't tell you this. Well, you know what? There are ways in which scientists know all kinds of things that don't necessarily require the ability of an animal to speak. For instance, whether it's heart rate or response of the nervous system or reflexes or blood flow or something like that. You just basically say, well, because a cat can't talk, it can't tell you if the medicine is taking away its headache. That seems like a very vague example to try and make that argument on, and I think that that's a little underwhelming. I do think that it's fairly easy to follow. I like some of the descriptions that you give. I shouldn't say like, I mean I appreciate the descriptions that you give. Like is a little disgusting maybe. Although, on the other hand, if some of the animals that they're testing on are disgusting, then maybe I don't feel so bad about it. I think you're a little quiet at the beginning, and I think you need to have your energy level up a bit as a speaker. All right, thank you.